Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Environmental Tracks, an overview of the Weisenberger Mill Bridge project. I'm Mike McGregor from Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering and Testing, and I want to thank you for joining. As we get started, I'd like to introduce the presenters for this session, Casey Smith and Phil Logsdon. And again, this is an overview of the Weisenberger Mill Bridge project. With that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name's Casey Smith, and I was the project manager for the Weisenberger Mill project. I'm here with our partner from FHWA-KY, Phil Logsdon, and he was the one who was able to help the cabinet manage and navigate us through the NEPA process and the Section 106 consultation. I'm pretty excited about this presentation. We have packed it full with a lot of pictures and graphics. We even got some videos, so I think it's going to put every environmental professional at the edge of their seats. So I'm very excited about telling the story that we have about the Weisenberger Mill Bridge replacement. So moving forward, I like to start out, kind of set the location, the setting for everyone. The project is it's located near Midway. Give everyone an idea, it's located on county roads about maybe 0.6 of a mile from US 421, which is Leestown Road, and about 2.5 miles from the city of little small city of Midway. We're located between Frankfort and Lexington. In regards to the roadway, the approaches on either side, it really varied between 17 feet to 23 feet in parts, and very little to no shoulder on the roadway on either side of the bridge. Back at that time, back at the time, the bridge carried about 1,200 vehicles a day before it was closed. And also there was a narrow curve that was on the Woodford County side that was about 95 feet in radius, and it just sits just south of the bridge over on the Woodford County side. But we'll have some pictures later in the presentation that kind of shows the location of that curve and kind of what's around that curve as well, because that also brought in some environmental factors into the project. This is a picture of the existing structure. The bridge was built back in 1930, and this was soon after the current mill that we see as today, which was originally built in 1913. It was a replacement from a mill that was previously there, owned by Robert Risk, I believe. But yeah, the current mill out there was built in 1913, so a historic mill. Based on our bridge inspection reports, there was a wooden deck actually on that structure, which was replaced back into the 1960s. The existing structure was 72 feet, and seeing it's a single span steel Pratt Pony truss. It had some moderate rusting on the upper chord and some advanced deterioration on the lower chords due to a lot of salt damage or corrosion. The abutments, as you can see there, they were all whetstone masonry. And if you see over on the left side, that's the Woodford County side abutment. They were more recently had some encasement work done on the wing walls of that abutment, and then over on the right side, barely see it behind that dead tree there, some gabion baskets that were put on there. And really, that's the Scott County side. That's where they were trying to really hold up the embankment for that abutment. This bridge really had some interesting features, and it kind of looked like it was piecemealed in some sense. But looking at this shot, you can see in the foreground, we have that standard W-beam guardrail that we're so used to seeing on our transportation projects. And, you know, at the beginning of the guardrail, it was that spec height, but then you get closer and closer to the bridge, it start getting lower and lower. Beyond that, we have some I-beams that are usually used in steel framing that are attached to solid concrete pillars. So very, very bulky, very sturdy. And but then when you get into the bridge structure, there's kind of looks like some like a handrail that's up through there. But yeah, it really did have some interesting factors as far as its railings and barriers that were used on that structure. And here's a good shot of the underside of the superstructure. It's there was extensive rusting on the stringers, and as you can see here, a pretty good shot of the severity of the corrosion, where you can see the lower lateral bracing is pretty much just hanging down. So there was much concern about the superstructure of the bridge, but that wasn't it. There was another point of great concern, and it was the abutments, particularly the Scott County abutment, and that's what we see pictured here. It's a whetstone masonry abutment, and over the years, it suffered a lot of mortar loss, had some severe cracking and scouring, especially underneath the gabion baskets that you see on the picture on the right. With these issues, there was obviously great concern of excessive movement of the abutment, which would result in its failure. And that was something that came of great concern. And throughout the throughout the history of this project, when we began, it started out with a 15-ton weight limit. This is the picture that you see there of the Scott County abutment. That was the point of most concern, where we saw that huge gaping crack right there, and it was showing signs of movement. In fact, throughout the length of the project, it kind of looked like that it was getting a little bit larger. That could just be in my mind, but yeah, it was a real serious issue. But in December of 2015, that weight limit went down from 15 tons to 3 tons. A lot of times when we post at 3 tons, is we're just trying to keep the bridge open for the meantime. But with the extensive corrosion of the superstructure and the critical state of the Scott County abutment, there was still that 1,200 vehicles of traffic crossing it, and the stress. The bridge was going under a lot of stress, and it was very taxing on the structure. And despite the 3-ton weight limit posting right on either side of the bridge, we noticed that this was still happening. And as I say, signs are great, but without without adequate enforcement and stuff, it more or less discourages people from doing things, and as opposed to prohibit. But people will try to cut corners and and take the risk if it gives them that benefit. But a funny story that I have with this is, and you don't see this on the photo, but I think some people out there probably remember Ananias Calvin, and this picture was taken when we were making a field visit to the bridge just to check it out. And you don't see it in the picture, but Ananias and I, at the time that this truck was approaching, we were kind of standing out there down the creek underneath the bridge. And as we saw this truck, as we heard, well, we didn't see it, we heard the truck coming. That really got us concerned, and we just got up and started running down the creek, and because we were like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be it, but the bridge stayed up. There was a big loud noise that happened as it was crossing, but it stayed up. But needless to say, after seeing this, the bridge inspectors actually went out there and did some more inspections. So that was quite interesting. One of my many adventures with Ananias Calvin III. So good memories. So anywho, as a design engineer, I was already conjuring up in my head how this was going to play out. You think that this will be a simple solution. It's a small project, right? And in my mind, we're saying, okay, we're going to have some spread footings. We're going to have new abutments, with a retaining wing wall. And of course, for the superstructure, the bridge is going to have to be replaced. So we're going to do it with a 2-lane bridge, and heck, we'll make it a truss superstructure. It's a nice looking area. We'll try to match it. With 1,200 vehicles, we'll probably be looking at 2 lanes. But as you can see here, as I scroll through all these, things got a little bit complicated. Okay, here we go. I was experiencing a little lag there. I'm sorry. But we're moving. Okay. So yeah, with all that response that we received from the media and from the public, it kind of makes you wonder. So well, what do we do now? And as evident with the media articles, there was a heightened level of protest and controversy that was very evident in the approach of the project. And as project manager, I was immersed with people's life stories and how this bridge was part of it. I've been told several stories about how this location was used for tourism. People have done photo shoots out there. I've heard of a story of a marriage proposal and people doing paintings. All these activities that you would think as a designer, I want to design to discourage such activity on such a narrow roadway. But there was a real there was a real life story in how this bridge was a part of it. And initially, this was a state-funded project. Later, federal funds were initiated, and so that allowed us to go and proceed following the guidelines of the NEPA process along with the federal purview. As far as we thought that we were at this time on this project, we found ourselves still very much at the conceptual stage and preliminary design without a preferred alternative and much less a workable solution. So at June 1st, 2016, that was the day when the bridge was closed to traffic. And this closure of the crossing of Elkhorn Creek had a major effect, even to an entire community. And as noted in the timeline, as you see there on the right, we still had a ways to go. So now I'd like to turn it over to Phil Logsdon, and he will go over some of the steps and what we have done to keep this project moving forward.
Thank you, Casey. I want to say I really enjoyed working with Casey and the folks in District 7 on this project. And actually, at that first public meeting, I was working in Frankfurt at the time. I was still with the cabinet, and I went to that public meeting as a cabinet employee, and then later ended up working on the project as a consultant. But you can see that after the bridge closed in early 2016, that it was 3 years before we got to construction, to a letting. And so I want to talk a little bit about what happened in that interim time frame. One of the things is because it was a historic bridge and a historic district, we knew we would have to do Section 106 coordination, and there was a decision to federalize the project. That may seem counterintuitive, but actually for Section 106, the federal process is much more predictable than the process with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so, we made a decision to do that. We had originally done this project with a programmatic agreement checklist for the historic, which really wasn't adequate for the level of engagement and the level of complexity that this project had. So there was a decision to, in consultation with the SHPO, to do a full historic study. And you can see all the items in blue on this timeline are Section 106 historic milestones, and then some other environmental and project milestones in black, and the biggies in red, the bridge closed and the CE being approved. The project had a lot of public involvement. You saw the newspaper articles. There were 3 public meetings throughout the life of the project. Every one of these public meetings was well attended. It's a small community, people talk. So, we had a handful of people say they didn't know, weren't aware of the project, but for the most part, people were very aware of this project. The other thing to note is that there was a strong support from the very beginning of this project for a rehabilitation of the existing bridge, or if that was not possible, to come up with a one-lane solution. People really did not see the need for a 2-lane bridge in this location. Rehabilitation was investigated, and it was determined that it would be difficult to provide much more than 15 or 20 years of service life at a pretty substantial cost, almost half as much as what it would have cost to replace the bridge. So I want to talk a little bit about just the historic setting of the project, the historic district. Of course, the bridge itself was considered eligible for the National Register, both for its own features and also as a contributing element to the Weisenberger Mill Historic District. I think the thing to realize about this project is it's not just a historic bridge in a rural setting. For the community, this bridge was really an iconic bridge. Weisenberger Mill is a destination. People go there to buy the little packets of flour and pancake mix and have a lot of memories associated with that. This bridge is actually has been for a long time a rest stop on one of the Horsey 100 routes, which is a major bicycle event that occurs every year. And so a lot of people are familiar with this bridge because of bike riding. And it's actually probably one of the more photographed places in central Kentucky. Like Casey said, people have had weddings here. It's pretty amazing photographs that people have taken here. Just a very scenic location. So during the formal historic study, there was a request from SHPO to look at a more comprehensive area potential effect. And you can see outlined in blue here is the APE that would encompass indirect effects such as noise and visual effects from the project. The other thing is that the Weisenberger Mill district had been listed on the National Register in 1984. You can see the little hand sketch drawing from that National Register nomination. And in that larger image there outlined in red or pink is the extent of that 25-acre National Register boundary. But in CRA looked at this again in 2018 and recommended a much smaller boundary, approximately 5 acres, largely due to changes in the landscape. And there were some new residences and some buildings that had been demolished and things like that that really changed the landscape and confined it to the smaller area. I'm just going to flip through. There's several slides here that just look at some of the different features that either contributed to the district or were eligible on their own or that were studied as part of the project. This millstone rock wall on the Woodford County side of the project as you approach the bridge is a very visible feature, and it's literally was constructed with used millstones from historic mills around central Kentucky, and definitely contributed to the historic district. There was some discussion about relocating this wall and rebuilding it, but there was a lot of concern about whether these millstones would hold up to that type of relocation. The property owner on this corner was pretty sensitive, pretty vocal about the project, to the point where at the end of the day, we ended up staying off of this property completely. Just some of the garages that were nearby on the project kind of made up to look like carriage houses. And again, the bridge itself constructed in 1930, a pony truss, contributing to the district. You can see the abutment there, and the alternatives that we were looking at this point would both have an adverse effect. We're looking at build alternatives that would replace this bridge. The Weisenberger Mill and Dam, of course, is the core of that historic district. The original mill was constructed in 1818. The Weisenberger family purchased in 1865, and then the newer buildings that you see here were constructed in 1913. And even though this was very, very close to the project footprint, the recommendation was that there would be no adverse effect to this resource. And there's a couple of other houses that were in that larger footprint that were studied. And some Scott County barns that were not considered eligible, but nice barns nonetheless. So you can see here the table that we came up with for the recommendations of effect. And you see number 4 there, the bridge itself was the resource that there was considered to be an adverse effect to. And no adverse effect based on the build alternatives on other resources, with the idea that the bridge would be replaced with a similar form truss bridge. Because historic resources are also Section 4F resources, we had to look at alternatives to use of those resources, one of which was a rehabilitation option, which, as I discussed earlier, was not really prudent due to the short lifespan and cost. We also looked at some avoidance corridors. We didn't have to look at these in detail, but we did have to consider them to the point where we could eliminate them based on potential impacts to other resources, cost, and mainly because if you build either one of these on new alignment, you either have to keep the old bridge in place to not have a 4F impact, which would require you to maintain 2 facilities, or demolish the old bridge, which would then be a 4F impact. And so we were able to eliminate avoidance alternatives. So there were 2 rounds of Section 106 consultation that took place on the project, or two meetings. The first one was in 2016, and at that time, the recommended alternative was a 2-lane bridge. That was the alternative that the Transportation Cabinet was promoting. And at that time, John Mateel from Michael Baker and Jeff Shea from HDR were running that meeting. You can see John in that picture up on the left, and I think that's Jeff in the middle of the picture on the bottom. And you can kind of see from people's body language here that they did not really want to hear about a 2-lane bridge. And I know from talking to folks that was a pretty challenging meeting. Ananias Calvin was the project manager at the time, and so as a result of that meeting, in correspondence surrounding that meeting, the Transportation Cabinet also shared some supporting documents for why they felt like a 2-lane bridge was the correct solution. But it was probably a little bit of overkill. 60 pages of research documents mailed out to every consulting party, and really looking at the safety of a 2-lane versus 1-lane bridge on a 2-lane highway. But when you really dig into some of the information about the project, the ADT, like Casey said, was around 1,200 and projected to grow to around 1,600, which certainly would put you towards a 2-lane bridge. But there really was a very low crash rate recorded in this area. Some natural features that cause people to slow down in terms of the way the road narrowed and the curves. So these are some of the comments that came out of that early consultation process. People were frustrated and disheartened. They felt like a 1-lane bridge was the best solution. My favorite, this was a shining example of public policy gone wrong. They were concerned about the size of the structure and the visual impacts. They were also concerned, I didn't capture this in a quote, but they were concerned about the speed. If we put a 2-lane bridge in, that people would speed through the area, which would be more dangerous. The last quote we'll come back and revisit later in the presentation, but with proper and thoughtful planning, this could be an award-winning showcase project for historical preservation. So by the time we came on board for the project, the road had been closed for around 2 years. And in that intervening time, the stakeholders had sort of organized and started meeting among themselves. So they got together with their fiscal court representatives and met out at the bridge, and they kind of made a pact between representatives from both counties and from local residents that they would all support a 1-lane bridge. And the other thing that happened during this time was that the Weisenberger family kept reaching out to the Transportation Cabinet, and they invited and hosted visits from the Cabinet Secretary, I believe from the State Highway Engineer, from the Director of Environmental Analysis, from the Chief District Engineer, and I'm sure others, where they would invite people, these folks out and explain their perspectives on the project, and then do a nice tour of the historic Weisenberger Mill facility. And so by July of 2018, the Transportation Cabinet had kind of come around to the idea that they would consider 1-lane alternatives for the replacement of the bridge. And you can see at this consulting party meeting, when we're presenting that idea, that folks are a lot more receptive. There's still some skepticism. There was some hesitation to completely trust the process, but you can just see from people's body language that they're hearing more what they want to hear. And so I think we had a little easier job than Jeff and John did during their phase of the project. The other thing that came out of this meeting was there's a community adjacent to the project called Zion Hill. It is a historically African-American hamlet that was settled after the Civil War. And they are actually in Scott County, but they're on the Woodford County side of the bridge. And so the only way that they could get to the 421 in Scott County was by a one-lane road that, because this bridge was closed, the one-lane road they were using was very busy and very challenging, and added 10 or 15 minutes to their commute. So the folks in Zion Hill were pretty upset. They had been to both Woodford and Scott County fiscal courts, and during that time, Woodford County agreed to provide emergency services for the Zion Hill community. But the folks in Zion Hill just wanted the project to advance. They wanted their bridge back, and they really didn't care whether it was one lane or two lanes. And I think they felt like that this whole discussion was a little tedious. After this consulting party meeting, we were able to talk to several folks, and we were able to get a few more of them to sign up and become consulting parties and be more involved in the project. So out of that consultation process, we finally got to agreement on a one-lane bridge, and the memorandum of agreement was signed in December of 2018. There were several mitigation commitments in that MOA. The main one being that we would replace the truss with a similar truss bridge, that the abutments that needed to be covered in shotcrete, the abutments and the gabion baskets, that those would be smoothed out to look more like poured concrete, that the mill property and building would be monitored for vibration during construction, that the historic bridge would be offered for reuse, which for a brief moment Midway was interested in it, but ultimately they decided not to participate in that. And then to develop and install some interpretive signage. And that interpretive panels, here's what they look like. So one of them addresses the history of the Weisenberger Mill, and the other one addresses the history of the Zion Hill community. These were put together by cultural resource analysts, and they are up out at the bridge now on the Scott County side of the bridge. And once we got through Section 106, that allows us to wrap up our NEPA process and get our CE signed. It was a CE3, so Federal Highways had to sign, and in January of 2019 they did. 106 wasn't the only thing we had to address in that CE. Archaeology, we had to get the archaeology survey done. Some endangered species, no habitat, no effect findings, asbestos containing material investigation for the bridge. And probably the most interesting one to me was the traffic noise study, because when Daniel Bergen went out and did that, well, the first place, the reason he had to do a traffic noise study is because we were looking at two-lane alternatives on a one-lane bridge. So we were adding capacity, and that made it a type 1 project. And so Daniel went out, and when he did his field work, the bridge was closed, so there was no traffic. And I'm not really sure what kind of magic he used to come up with the existing noise levels, but he did manage to get the noise study done, and it's part of the record now. So I'm going to turn this back over to Casey to talk about some more of the engineering aspects and the construction phase of the project. I am not seeing Casey. Maybe he's having a little trouble getting on. There he is.
Yeah. For some reason the camera wasn't coming back on, but luckily I was able to figure that one out. All right. So we saw the list of the stipulations that are outlined in the MOA, and some of them really weren't that bad. Vibration monitoring, sure, we could add that as a proposal note. A one-lane bridge of similar scale and structure, sure, we could do that. It's a lot of the items, we were able to take care of, but there was one thing that was a little bit more difficult to address, and that was coming up with a solution regarding the abutment. And so our geotechnical team in Frankfurt, they really had a big challenge, and that was that was really saving the existing abutment, doing the shotcrete treatment, and keeping the hydraulic opening as open as much as we can. And this is a picture of I think that's Daryl Greer up there on the top, and he's probably saying to himself, how in the world are we going to protect this abutment? It was quite a challenge. And so what we did is we brought in a contractor through the master agreement, GSI, which is a Geostabilization International, and we began discussions on for them to develop solutions on saving the existing abutment for the single lane bridge. And this is what they came up with. To prevent the abutments from further movement, a solution was put together by the use of soil nails and also some micropiling around the base to provide that scour protection. The shotcrete treatment that was part of that MOA was applied around the perimeter of the abutment and also the retaining walls. And the main objective of the shotcrete is that it would protect the ends of the soil nails from further corrosion, because the ends of those nails would be exposed. So at least that covers it up and keep it from further corrosion. The plans and proposals for the treatment to the existing abutments were all packaged together with the coordination between the district, the geotechnical branch, and also the bridge office, along with the contractor, on-call contractor with GSI. So with the geotechnical part figured out, and that did take some time to get all the plans and notes all together, we did proceed over onto the right-of-way phase and utility phase. We just had temporary easements on this project, initially 4 temporary easements. And it did take some time because there were still some hard feelings out there. And but with the diligence and the hard work of our right-of-way staff and those in our utility section, we were able to get those cleared up on time to get it let in the summertime. Now, to getting the project awarded, that actually turned out to be a bigger challenge than I originally thought. We took the project to a June 2019 letting with an engineer's estimate of, I believe it was $710,000. The sole bidder that we received on that one the bid came in at $1.95 million. So needless to say, it was rejected. So we thought, well, we'll try again. And so we re-advertised it for the July 2019 letting. But we did some modifications not modifications, but we removed a portion of the geotechnical work, more specifically, out of that initial contract. And then we also extended a fixed completion date to May 1st. And with that financial incentive for finishing before the end of the year, the end of the year is what the fixed completion day I had when we were going to try to let it in June 2009. So we added that incentive to see if that could be done. The engineer's estimate at that time was $619,000. And we did get a bid of $877,000, well worth removing the geotechnical work and having that as a separate contract for GSI to work on. A successful award was made, and it was awarded to Louisville Paving and Construction. And this is one of the pictures that we have, and we have several pictures, and I know everybody loves pictures, particularly construction pictures. So I'm going to be painting through some of this, but this is a shot of the crane that they brought in. And the idea was to remove the superstructure, the truss structure, all in one piece. They had to remove the asphalt, obviously, to lighten the load. And even when they did that, it was still too heavy for that crane. So they actually had to go back and continue to remove, just a half an inch or something, or to try to reduce the weight so that it would be not too heavy for that crane. And as they were putting it onto the bed of the semi truck that was sitting there on the Scott County side, you can see it. They're laying it down right there. The crane actually had to lift up the bridge structure from the abutments and rotate it around onto the truck. As you see, it's a really tight space that they were working in. So the bridge was actually literally hanging over the mill building there where they actually have their stores. So they told the Weisenbergers to try to stay out of that area, just in case something exciting happens. But everything went very smoothly. It was a very long process. And being very careful not to do any damage or cause any harm. So, but it came off all in one piece. It was successful, and it was hauled out. So, being a very tight area, and we did have some temporary easements to help, but the actual bridge, the replacement bridge structure actually had to be assembled at a different site. And this is a site that's off, it's north of I-64, around the same general area as the Weisenberger Mill bridge location. But it did have to be assembled off-site. And then once that was all put together, it was trucked in to where it will be placed onto the newly rehabbed abutments. This is a pretty good drone shot that the contractor took, probably for liability reasons. But this was one of the most concerned areas that they had to go through and deal with, was this really tight part on Leestown Road. This is one of the railroad underpasses, and you can see the really tight fitting of getting that bridge structure through. So that was also some cause of excitement. Nothing happened. It was it went through just fine. I'm sure they were really putting a lot of attention into making sure that they don't do any damage or cause any trouble. And then once they got to Weisenberger Mill Road, then the truck driver was diligently backing up the truss structure for I think it was a little over half a mile to get to the location, backing up a semi truck half a mile to get to the location of the creek crossing. They took the same crane, hoisted it up, and just very carefully placed it onto the abutments there that you see that have been newly rehabbed with the soil nailing, the micro piles, and the shotcrete treatment. So the bridge was a little bit longer than the existing one. We did extend it a little bit into the Scott County side due to the condition of that of the old abutment, but it went without a hitch. They did a really good job out there. So after the bridge being closed while navigating the NEPA process, and of course the heavy handling involved in public involvement, along with the engineering challenges that arose along the way, the bridge crossing did open, and it opened on December 23rd, 2019. That was 5 months before the fixed completion date of May 1st. That was part of the contract. And I also like to think of it as an early Christmas gift for the communities that were, really heavily impacted by the closure of the existing structure. So for those of you who have not seen the new bridge or have not stopped by to, pick up some of their renowned buttermilk pancake mix, we did upload this video here to serve kind of as a premiere of the new bridge that we would like to show you. I'm going to transfer it over. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that. I know that song's going to be stuck in my head for quite some time, and I don't know about everyone else, but so with the bridge opening, was really an end to a success story, so to speak. It gave people reason to celebrate, and we've attached here some photos of a ribbon cutting that was held early this year. You can see in the picture that we have our very own Secretary Jim Gray, who was in attendance. He also spoke to the media here at this ribbon cutting, along with Kelly Baker, our Chief District Engineer. And there's also county judge executives. Looks like Representative Gravis is there. And of course, I being the project manager, I was just standing there in the back. But yeah, it was. But there was a reason to celebrate, and having the secretary there, the county judges, magistrates, and, in attendance, it really gave you a level of how important this project was to the community. This was a very small project, and really when we started this project, didn't really realize, how important it was until we actually went through this process. And I think that really shows very well on this for this ribbon cutting. We also had this appreciation from the community, and for being such a small bridge project, there was a lot of memory and emotion connected to the old Weisenberger Mill Bridge. But when you put that aside, all the negative emotions and the upset people during the time of the project, and really just taking a step back and seeing how the project actually evolved, I found that the environmental process was actually working by design. Following the guidance with NEPA, with the purview of the feds, it's not always a bad thing. And but the process did work. And after the new bridge opened and people saw what we did, it was great to know that the feeling went from the fear and the frustration of what this project could end up being to a moment of gratitude. And many times, I think as transportation engineers, sometimes you have just as much responsibility to the public as you do on your projects. So I thought that this was a pretty good example of that. This T-shirt that I have here on this picture, this was actually gifted to me at my office from Judge K, who is the county judge executive of Woodford County. And apparently there's someone out there in Midway who's been stamping these T-shirts with the "Just Add Water" slogan on the T-shirt. It was a slogan that they put on all of their flour mixes. So you probably remember the quote from someone on one of the Section 106 meetings about, "With proper planning, this could be an award-winning project." Well, we took that to heart. So we sometimes, even in a small project, it takes a strong team to get it through. And we thought that this project yielded such a good story, and that that we applied it for the ASHA Bluegrass Chapter Project Award for 2020. And I am pleased to say that we have one. And this is a picture of some of the project team members in front of the bridge and the mill in the background. But that goes, it doesn't go without saying that, we would really like to recognize that this couldn't have been done without the support and professionalism of those who had a hand in the completion of such a unique project. Not just the consultants, not just the cabinet, but also the stakeholders who are involved as well. So thank you. I can hand over the mic, or
so I'll go ahead and from Donna Harden, District 5, was wondering if there was any damage to the historic mill and how smoothly the vibration monitoring went. So Casey and I talked about this. I don't believe that there was anything in the in that vibration monitoring that exceeded any kind of thresholds that we would have been concerned about. Is that correct, Casey?
Yeah, I mean, they also had concerns about like traffic that was going by there, but we really weren't changing the distance that the roadway was going to be to the mill. But yeah, there was concern about that vibration construction wise. Yeah. So we set up a proposal note on there where it would be monitored, and when it exceeded a certain amount of particle movement, that it would, it would halt construction for the time until they figure out what's going on. So.
Yeah, there was no blasting, but that putting in those soil nails, we thought that there might be some vibration there, and certainly the stakeholders were concerned, and we were very, very close to that historic mill building. So the next two questions are basically the same question. Why was it from Brett Swager and from Donna again? Why was it so important to save the existing abutment? If it's just going to be covered with shotcrete, you wouldn't be able to see the historic masonry, which is very true. I really think it was less a matter of trying to preserve the historic abutments as it was trying to have the least invasive project that we could, because on both ends of the bridge, if we took out the existing abutment, obviously on the mill side, like I said, we were so close to that building. I think that we felt like that there would be a risk of doing some damage there. And then on the Woodford County side, there was that that millstone wall that was quite close as well. And a matter of fact, that property owner, was pretty directly brought that up as an issue that they felt like was a concern for any kind of disturbance on that side of the creek. And so I think that drove the decision, along with cost, as much as anything. Any other perspective on that, Casey?
Yeah, I mean, that would kind of, taking out the existing abutments and then putting in just regular concrete replacement abutments, you're talking about getting a construction limit that, went a little further than it really had to be. So.
And then Donna has a follow-up question on the vibration, is how do we come up with that maximum limit? I believe that was based on the limits that you would get from blasting limits. Is that correct, Casey?
Yeah, and we actually use an example from another vibration monitoring note that was done out in District 4, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, we utilized some of the same wording on that proposal note to determine, for how much of a particle movement we could have, for the vibration monitoring. So.
I think we've still got a couple of minutes left. I don't see any more questions. Let me check the chat box. Just a bunch of people telling us we're doing a good job, Casey. So.
Oh, wow. Huh? Okay. That's awesome.
Well, we appreciate everybody's participation today, and certainly feel free to reach out to either Casey or I if you have any questions going forward. So we've really enjoyed working on this project, and it was nice to see it come to a successful conclusion. So
thank you very much for all the positive comments that we're receiving here.
I guess we just let the time run out, Casey, in case anybody comes up with anything.
Yeah.
You got any good jokes?
You got any stories to tell? Yeah.
I'm not going off script.
All right. There's a comment from Amanda Abner here. Yeah, we really do need to recognize Jonna's part in this project and the work that was done with the DEA. I remember the very first, on our first Section 106 meeting, it was very trying, and it's a lot of people that were upset with that whole 2-lane bridge idea. So yes, I agree. Yeah, Jonna really does need some props for her work on this part as well. So,
yeah, I'll echo that. I think unless you've been on the receiving end of somebody who's just so upset and attached to their position about their historic resource, it can get pretty emotional. And I felt like that we pulled together as a project team. And I will also say, in addition to John, Craig Potts at SHPO really stepped up, and he was very helpful in clarifying what the process allowed and didn't allow, and he supported reducing the historic boundary of that district, and so I think. We had a really good team, but you do have to pull together, and it can feel a little you can feel like you're being attacked, but you have to remember that these people, the reason that they're so passionate is because they really care about their resource there. So I think we're out. So I'm going to log off here. You guys have a great rest of the partnering conference. I believe there will be a brief survey that comes up when you log out of this conference.
So 5 stars, please. Yeah. All right.